Operation Sky Shield, the day British bombers penetrated America. Imagine for a moment that it's October 14th, 1961. The Cold War is at its frozen peak, and across North America, an extraordinary event is about to unfold. From the Arctic Circle to the Mexican border, every single civilian aircraft is being grounded. Thousands of passengers are being told their flights are cancelled. Air traffic controllers are clearing the skies in the largest aviation shutdown in history. This isn't a natural disaster or a technical failure. This is Operation Sky Shield 2, and it's about to reveal a truth that the American military would prefer to keep hidden. In Colorado Springs, deep within the Rocky Mountains, the command center of the North American Aerospace Defense Command hums with activity. NORAD, as it's known, represents the pinnacle of American and Canadian air defense technology. It's a system built on the cutting edge of 1960s innovation, featuring the SAGE computer system, one of the most sophisticated radar networks ever created, linked to hundreds of fighter squadrons, missile batteries, and early warning stations stretching across an entire continent. The men and women operating this system have been trained for one purpose: to detect and destroy Soviet bombers before they can reach American cities. Today, they're about to be tested. But there's something the American public doesn't know. Something that won't be revealed for years to come. High above the Atlantic Ocean, 8 aircraft are preparing to expose the greatest vulnerability in American air defense. They're not Soviet bombers. They're RAF Vulcan bombers, and they're about to do something extraordinary. The Avro Vulcan is unlike any aircraft that has come before it. When you first see one, it doesn't quite look real. The massive delta wing stretches over 100 feet from tip to tip, a perfect triangle of gleaming white metal that seems to defy every principle of conventional aircraft design. There's no tail, no obvious fuselage, just this beautiful, elegant wedge of an aircraft that looks more like something from a science fiction film than a military bomber. But beneath that graceful exterior lies devastating capability. 4 Bristol Olympus engines, buried deep within the wing roots, produce enough thrust to push this massive aircraft to speeds approaching the sound barrier. The Vulcan can climb to 56,000 feet, nearly 11 miles high, where the sky turns dark purple and the curvature of the Earth becomes visible below. At that altitude, the air is so thin that most fighter aircraft of the era simply cannot reach it. Those that can find themselves struggling, their engines gasping for oxygen, their wings losing lift in the rarefied atmosphere. But the Vulcan, with its massive delta wing and powerful engines, operates there with ease, dancing through the thin air with an agility that seems impossible for such a large aircraft. The Vulcan carries Britain's nuclear deterrent, armed with weapons capable of destroying entire cities. But perhaps more importantly for what's about to happen, it carries some of the most sophisticated electronic warfare equipment in the world. The British have learned hard lessons over the years about how to penetrate enemy defenses, and they've invested heavily in jamming systems, chaff dispensers, and electronic countermeasures that can confuse and blind radar systems. On this October morning, 8 Vulcans are positioned at 2 locations. 4 aircraft from 83 squadrons sit at RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland, their crews preparing for a long flight south and then west across the Atlantic to attack America from the north. 4 more aircraft from 27 Squadron wait at Kinderley Air Force Base in Bermuda, ready to strike from the south. The crews understand what's at stake. This isn't just an exercise. This is a demonstration, an opportunity to show what their aircraft can do under realistic combat conditions. In the NORAD command center, American and British officers sit side by side. Air Marshal Sir Kenneth Cross of RAF Bomber Command and Sir Wallace Kyle, Chief of the RAF's Technical Training Command, watch the displays alongside General Lawrence Cuter, Commander of NORAD. The atmosphere is professional, collegial even, but there's an undercurrent of competitive tension. The Americans are proud of their defense system. They've told the public it's 99% effective. Now they're about to find out if that claim can withstand a determined attack by the RAF's finest bombers. The exercise involves more than just the Vulcans. 250 American bombers will participate, including B-52 Stratofortress and B-47 Stratojets, simulating a massive Soviet attack. Against them, NORAD will scramble 1,800 fighters, launch simulated missiles from 250 sites, and coordinate tracking through every radar station from Alaska to Florida. 6,000 sorties will be flown. More than 200,000 military personnel will take part. It's the largest air defense exercise ever conducted in the Western Hemisphere. But the Vulcans are different. They're not part of the American force. They're operating independently, using their own tactics, their own electronic warfare techniques, their own cunning. And they have something to prove. As the clock ticks toward 11 a.m. Eastern Time, the civilian aircraft have been cleared from the skies. The airspace over North America is empty, waiting. And then, somewhere over the Atlantic, the Vulcans begin their approach. The game is about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The game is about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. This is about more than just an exercise. This is about the future of air defense, about the vulnerability of an entire continent, and about what happens when confidence meets reality at 56,000 feet. The northern wave strikes first. The 4 Vulcans from 83 Squadron, having flown south from Scotland and then turned west over the Atlantic, approach the North American coast at dawn. But they don't come alone. American B-47 Stratofortress bombers go in first, flying low, some as low as 500 feet above the ocean, their electronic warfare systems blazing, jamming out the ground radars, creating a screen of electronic chaos that confuses NORAD's tracking systems. Inside the NORAD command center, the first returns appear on the radar scopes. The operators see what they expect to see, multiple contacts approaching from the north, flying at medium altitude. Fighters are scrambled from bases across Canada and the northern United States. F-101 Voodoos, F-102 Delta Daggers, and F-106 Delta Darts climb into the October sky, their pilots pushing their aircraft toward the approaching threat. And then the Vulcans appear. Not where NORAD expected them, but above, far above the American bombers. At 56,000 feet, the 4 British bombers cruise southward, their powerful jamming equipment adding to the electronic confusion below. The American fighters concentrate on the B-52s, the obvious targets flying at 35 to 42,000 feet. This is their mission profile, what they've trained for. Intercept the bombers before they reach their targets. But there's a problem. By the time the fighters deal with the medium-altitude bombers and realize there are high-altitude contacts above them, they're running low on fuel. To climb from 40,000 feet to 56,000 requires time and enormous amounts of fuel. The fighters that attempt it find themselves struggling. At that altitude, the air is so thin that their jet engines produce less thrust, their wings generate less lift. The Vulcans, designed specifically for high-altitude operations, have no such problems. One F-101 Voodoo manages to intercept a Vulcan high above Goose Bay, Labrador. The pilot climbs and climbs, pushing his aircraft to its absolute limits, and finally achieves a simulated kill. It's recorded as the first casualty of the exercise, and it's an RAF aircraft. But it's also the only success of the northern attack. The other 3 Vulcans, covered by each other's jamming, protected by the electronic chaos they've created, penetrate deep into American airspace completely undetected. They could have struck New York, Boston, or any number of targets along the eastern seaboard. Eventually, they land safely at Stephenville, Newfoundland, their mission accomplished. The southern wave is even more dramatic. The 4 Vulcans from 27 Squadron, launching from Bermuda, approached the American coast in a broad formation, all of their jamming equipment active, all of their electronic warfare systems blazing. NORAD's radar operators see them coming. 4 distinct contacts, approaching from the southeast. Fighters are scrambled. F-102 Delta daggers from multiple bases climb to intercept. But the Vulcans have a trick planned. As they approach within 50 miles of the coast, at the moment when the American fighters are being unleashed, something unexpected happens. The southernmost Vulcan, the one flying on the right edge of the formation, suddenly breaks away. It turns north, swinging around behind the jamming screen created by its 3 sister ships. The American fighters, seeing 3 targets in front of them, concentrate on those. It's the obvious tactical decision. Engage the threat you can see. The lone Vulcan, now flying north along the coast, hidden behind the electronic curtain created by the other 3 aircraft, simply vanishes from NORAD screens. The radar operators lose track of it. The fighters don't even know it's there. And while everyone's attention is focused on the 3 lead Vulcans, the 4th aircraft slips through the gaps in the defense like a ghost. It flies north, then turns west, penetrating deep into American airspace. It crosses over land, flying above New York State, and eventually lands at Plattsburgh Air Force Base. The crew climbs out of their aircraft, tired but triumphant. They've just completed a simulated nuclear strike on American soil, and nobody stopped them. In a real war, they could have destroyed New York City, or Washington, D.C., or any major city within their range. The American air defense system, the system that protects the most powerful nation on Earth, never saw them coming. Back in the NORAD command center, the atmosphere has changed. The radar displays show the truth in stark, undeniable terms. The SAGE system, the pride of American air defense technology, has been able to track less than 1/3 of the total miles flown by the attacking bombers. The electronic warfare systems that the British have developed, refined over years of exercises and training, have proven devastatingly effective. Simple chaff, strips of aluminum foil designed to confuse radar, has overwhelmed the sophisticated American systems, forcing operators to switch to manual tracking. But manual tracking is slow, imprecise, and by the time the human operators realize what's happening, the bombers are already in range of their targets. The results are sobering. NORAD acknowledges, in classified reports that won't be released until 1997, that no more than 1/4 of the attacking bombers would have been intercepted. 3 out of every 4 would have reached their targets. In a real Soviet attack, that would mean dozens of American cities destroyed, tens of millions of people killed, the fabric of American civilization torn apart. The 99% effectiveness that the government has promised the public is revealed to be an illusion, a comforting fiction that doesn't survive contact with reality. But there's another truth emerging from the data, one that's even more disturbing. The exercise assumes that Soviet bombers would fly high, as the Americans do, at 35,000 to 45,000 feet. But NORAD's own analysts acknowledge in their reports that real enemy bombers would likely fly much lower, hugging the terrain, where radar coverage is weakest. And if they did that, if they came in low instead of high, the results would be even worse. The penetration rate would be even higher. The number of destroyed cities would grow. The Vulcans have exposed a fundamental vulnerability in American air defense. The system works well against bombers that do what the Americans expect them to do, that fly where the Americans expect them to fly, that use the tactics the Americans have prepared for. But against an enemy that thinks differently, that uses unexpected tactics, that exploits electronic warfare to its fullest extent, the system struggles. The continental United States, protected by the most advanced air defense network ever created, has been penetrated by 8 British bombers operating under exercise conditions, where everyone knew they were coming and where they were starting from. In a real war, with hundreds of Soviet bombers approaching from multiple directions simultaneously, using every deception technique available, the results could be catastrophic. Operation Sky Shield 2 has revealed a truth that no one wanted to face. America is vulnerable, more vulnerable than anyone in government has been willing to admit. For more than a year, the results of Operation Sky Shield 2 remain classified, locked away in secure files, known only to the highest levels of military and political leadership. The American public continues to believe that NORAD provides near-perfect protection, that the air defense system would successfully repel any Soviet attack. The truth, the uncomfortable reality revealed by 8 British bombers, is too sensitive to share. But secrets have a way of getting out. In January 1963, more than a year after the exercise, a British newspaper, the Daily Express, publishes a story about the RAF Vulcans and their successful penetration of American airspace. The article claims that British bombers, operating during Sky Shield 2, managed to reach their targets undetected, exposing serious flaws in NORAD's defenses. The American response is swift and categorical. The United States Department of Defense issues a statement strenuously denying the report. They claim that British aircraft last participated in a strategic air command exercise over the United States in autumn of 1960, implying that the newspaper has its dates wrong, its facts confused. Eugene Zuckert, Secretary of the Air Force, goes even further, calling the Daily Express report completely without foundation. But the denial contains a subtle admission. By stating that British aircraft participated in 1960, the Department of Defense is acknowledging that RAF bombers have indeed operated over American territory in exercises. And the date confusion actually reveals something important. The first Vulcan B.2, the advanced version that participated in Sky Shield 2, wasn't delivered to the RAF until July 1960. The first operational squadron didn't receive their B.2s until December 1960. The American statement, intended to refute the British newspaper, instead confirms that something significant happened in 1961. The controversy highlights the political sensitivity of the exercise results. In 1963, the United States is in the midst of a major debate about the Skybolt missile program, an air-launched ballistic missile that was supposed to extend the life of Britain's V-bomber force. The Kennedy administration has decided to cancel Skybolt, a decision that threatens to leave Britain without a credible nuclear deterrent. Some observers, including the Chicago Tribune, suggest that the RAF leaked the Sky Shield story to embarrass the Kennedy administration, to demonstrate that British bombers are still highly capable and that cancelling Skybolt would weaken Western defences. Whether that's true or not, the story of the Vulcan penetrations eventually becomes part of Cold War lore, sometimes exaggerated into an urban legend about how the RAF nuked America twice. The reality is more nuanced but no less significant. The Vulcans successfully demonstrated that even the most sophisticated air defense system of the era could be beaten by well-trained crews, advanced aircraft, and clever tactics. The lessons learned from Operation Sky Shield 2 drive significant changes in American and Canadian air defense strategy. NORAD recognizes that high-altitude defense alone is insufficient. New radar systems are developed to provide better coverage at all altitudes. Fighter tactics evolve to deal with high-flying targets. Electronic warfare capabilities are enhanced to counter jamming and deception. The vulnerability exposed by the British bombers leads to improvements that strengthen the air defense of North America. But there's a deeper lesson here, one that extends beyond the technical details of radar and missiles and jamming systems. Operation Sky Shield 2 demonstrates the inherent difficulty of defending against a determined air attack. The defenders must be successful every time. The attackers need to succeed only once. The defenders must cover thousands of miles of territory, millions of square miles of airspace. The attackers can choose their route, their altitude, their timing. The defenders must respond to threats as they appear. the attackers can plan and rehearse and refine their approach until it's perfect. The Vulcan crews who flew in Sky Shield II were operating under enormous constraints. They couldn't change their departure points. NORAD knew where they were starting from. They couldn't achieve complete surprise. NORAD knew they were coming. They were participating in an exercise, not a war, where safety considerations limited what they could do. And yet, despite all these handicaps, they succeeded in penetrating American airspace and reaching their simulated targets. Imagine what Soviet bomber crews might achieve in a real war, with no safety constraints, with complete tactical flexibility, with the ability to launch from multiple bases and approach from any direction. The implications are sobering. No air defense system, no matter how sophisticated, can provide perfect protection. There will always be bombers that get through, always be gaps in the coverage, always be ways to exploit weaknesses. This reality drives the evolution of nuclear strategy throughout the 1960s and beyond. The emphasis shifts from defense to deterrence, from trying to shoot down every bomber to ensuring that any attacker knows they will face devastating retaliation. The ballistic missile submarine becomes the ultimate deterrent weapon, invulnerable in the ocean depths, always ready to strike back. The high-altitude bomber, once the ultimate weapon of strategic air power, gradually becomes obsolete, replaced by low-flying cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that travel too fast to intercept. The Avro Vulcan itself adapts to this changing reality. Having proven that it can operate successfully at extreme altitude, the Vulcan switches to low-level tactics in the mid-1960s, flying at treetop height to avoid radar detection. The aircraft that once cruised at 56,000 feet now operates below 100 feet, screaming across the landscape so low that it must pull up to avoid hills and power lines. It's a dramatic reversal, driven by the same lesson learned in Sky Shield II. Altitude alone is no longer sufficient protection. The Vulcan continues in RAF service until 1984, outlasting its intended replacement and ultimately participating in one final mission that brings it back to high-altitude operations. During the Falklands War of 1982, Vulcans fly the longest bombing raids in history, launching from Ascension Island to strike targets in the Falkland Islands, a round trip of nearly 8,000 miles requiring multiple aerial refuelings. These Black Buck missions, named after the aircraft call signs, demonstrate that the old bomber still has teeth, still has capability, still has the ability to project power across vast distances. But the real legacy of the Vulcan, and of Operation Sky Shield II, isn't about one aircraft or one exercise. It's about the fundamental nature of air defense, about the limits of technology, and about the gap between what we want to believe and what is actually true. The American people wanted to believe they were 99% protected. The government told them they were 99% protected. But 8 British bombers, operating under exercise conditions, proved that the real number was much lower, that the protection was much more fragile than anyone wanted to admit. As we look back now, more than 60 years later, we can see Operation Sky Shield II as a turning point, a moment when comforting illusions collided with uncomfortable reality. The Vulcan crews who flew that day didn't set out to embarrass the Americans or to expose their weaknesses. They simply did what they were trained to do, what their aircraft was designed to do, and in doing so, they revealed a truth that changed history. The elegant delta-winged bomber, with its distinctive howl and its graceful lines, became more than just an aircraft. It became a symbol of capability, of ingenuity, of the eternal struggle between attack and defense. And on that October day in 1961, high above America, the Vulcan proved that even the mightiest defense can be beaten by skill, determination, and a little bit of cleverness. The last flying Vulcan, XH-558, made its final flight in October 2015, marking the end of an era. But the lessons of Operation Sky Shield II remain relevant. In an age of stealth aircraft, hypersonic missiles, and cyber warfare, the fundamental truth hasn't changed. No defense is perfect, no protection is absolute, and the price of security is constant vigilance, constant improvement, and a willingness to acknowledge vulnerabilities before an enemy can exploit them. The Vulcans are gone now, preserved in museums and memories, but their greatest mission wasn't the Falklands raid or the years of nuclear deterrence patrols. It was that day in 1961 when they flew through the autumn sky and showed the world that even America could be touched, even the strongest defense could be penetrated, and even the most comfortable assumptions could be proven wrong. That's the real story of Operation Sky Shield 2, and it's a story worth remembering.